having conquered it from the Vandals. And in 1839, Queen Victoria proposed to her cousin Albert. So I think we're ready to go. I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved and seconded. Are there any additions to the agenda or any changes? Director Hiltz.
Yes, new business for Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Resilience Summit, November the 6th.
Okay. I'm going to write that down. Anything else? I would like to add one, which is just a very, very brief update on the AVICC Solid Waste Committee. Do we have anything further? Not seeing anything. Could we, do we need another motion to amend the agenda, or can we just vote on the agenda as amended? All right, we're going to vote on the agenda as amended. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that's our agenda. Okay, first up on our agenda is, actually I think first I'd like a motion to receive all reports and communications. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Received, thank you very much. Okay, first up is Soren Poshman and Sarah Barbosa from ISL Engineering and Land Services Limited regarding the Eastbourne water system. Over to you.
Thank you. I will share my screen quickly and hope it works. There we go. Looks like we have success. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for having Sarah and I here this morning to give you a quick update on the findings of our feasibility study for the Eastbourne water system on Keats Island. So we'll quickly go through, I'll get my slides working, there we go. Just quickly go through our scope and findings, conclusions, and results. So going into this, we were aware through the regional district that the Eastbourne water system is really overtaxed and at risk of being unsustainable for meeting the water demands of the residents. The system's nearly solely reliant on precipitation and really struggles to meet demands, particularly in the summer. And this is expected to be further exacerbated as there's increased both summer vacationers and year-long residents. So our scope was to undertake a feasibility study of the system to ensure continually safe and reliable drinking water source. So the system itself, Eastbourne, is on the eastern portion of Keats Island. Water source currently is 3 shallow wells. So the Old East and Gordon wells are dug. The collector well is a trench and sump system, and then there is one deeper bedrock aquifer drilled well. There is water treatment for arsenic, as well as filtration, UV, and chlorination. Water is then pumped to treated water storage tanks and gravity fed to residences, each of which have their own tank on their property. So our objectives were to evaluate the performance of the existing wells, to review the water storage distribution networks, to determine the volume currently supplied by the system, as well as the amount anticipated to be needed, and then a desktop hydrogeological investigation, and choosing some potential exploratory drilling locations. Step one, we took a look at the existing wells. We had about 6.5 years worth of data of water levels and pumping rates we looked at. And we completed this to take a closer look at how the wells were performing, both in the summer and winter. And what we found, this graph here, essentially shows, you can see with the flattening out of the dots or the water levels. So this is every summer. This flattening out says that the wells are essentially going dry. So confirming what we were told. Interestingly, the pumping rates, aside from a few peaks, were fairly steady throughout the summer and winter. So we know anecdotally there are more people out there in the summer. Demand should be higher, but we weren't seeing that in the pumping rates from the wells. So that kind of suggests that the wells just aren't able to keep up in the summer, which again is shown by the wells going dry. This graph here is hard to show, or hard to see at this scale, but the blue bars are precipitation. So this, when you zoom in, you can really see, like, on days with high precipitation events, 2 or 3 days later, the water levels in the wells go up. So really the 3 shallow wells especially are directly tied to precipitation and are also susceptible to climate change impacts as well. Quickly, these are just graphs of the individual wells. We didn't have water levels for the drilled well, but this deeper well you can see is kind of tailing off in its production and ability to provide water. So it's showing a diminished usage as well. So again, interestingly, there's no kind of noticeable summer higher pumping rates. So again, it kind of hammers home that these wells are pretty much maxed out in the summer. To conclude this part, again, wells are going dry in the summer. To figure out exactly how much they can provide was a bit difficult. We made the safe assumption that the overall annual average, so the whole year average flow rates that the wells can provide, is probably about the max they can do. So that equates to 0.24 liters per second, which is an important number to remember. So we'll talk about recommendations at the end, but just at this point, we're not recommending, spending money to increase the capacity of these wells as it stands. It doesn't reduce your reliance on precipitation, and money is probably better spent looking at new sources. So we'll talk about that a bit later. With that, I will throw it to Sarah to talk about the engineering review.
All right, thank you, Soren. So the next step of the project was to perform an assessment of the water distribution system, which we did for both existing and future conditions. So this involved determining the demands for the current and build-out populations, finding the maximum and minimum pressures for these demand scenarios, and then noting any improvements. And then just a bit of a summary regarding the existing Eastbourne water system. So it's comprised of 5.5 kilometers of distribution mains, ranging in size from 25 millimeters to 50 millimeters. All of the 25 and 38 millimeter water mains are comprised of PVC, and the 50 millimeter water mains are comprised of HDPE. And also just a note that the system isn't currently set up to supply fire flow protection, just given the size of the existing water mains, the lack of a fire pump or the available water supply, and also water storage deficiencies. In terms of potable water storage, there's 7 totes for a total capacity of 52.5 cubic meters at the water treatment plant. There's also 2 storage totes in the community, and they're able to hold a total capacity of 22.5 cubic meters. And then, as Soren already mentioned, each property is, they've got their own on-lot storage tanks. So based on the historic Eastbourne water system data that was provided to ISL, we were able to determine the daily demands through the available distribution data. So we calculated an average daily demand of 0.22 liters per second, which was also cross-checked against the pumping rates, the average annual consumption, and the comprehensive regional water plan. So we found that the maximum day demand was generally about 0.45 liters per second based off of the historic data. And this also agreed to the derived flow of 0.44 liters per second, which we calculated using the consumption rates and the peaking factor. We ended up building a new model from scratch and used the existing small systems model just as a reference. And we did this just because of the age of the existing model. So we had noticed some discrepancies between pipe sizing, alignments, active infrastructure, and we also wanted to make sure that the demands were up to date. So we used WaterCAD by Bentley for the modeling process. In terms of the pressure results, so what we're looking for in the system is ensuring that there's positive pressures at each parcel, and then also ensuring that the distribution mains don't exceed a pressure of 850 kPa. So basically what we're seeing here is that the distribution system is performing adequately under average day demand conditions. And similar for MDD, it's not too different from ADD. We're still getting the same trend, generally with the conclusion that pressures are adequate under these conditions as well. So under future conditions, an additional 38 lots were added to the network, which resulted in an additional 87 people. So this gave an additional demand of 0.05 liters per second under the average daily demand conditions. So the total maximum day demand flows were equivalent to 0.54 liters per second. So the pressure differences between the existing and future conditions aren't, they're quite minimal. There's only an increase of 0.05 liters per second, which isn't overly significant. So this also just shows that the system is performing adequately under future conditions as well. And just a summary of our findings from the existing system assessment. So the distribution system, it adequately supplies pressures to each residence tank, while also not exceeding the maximum pressure of 850 kPa. There's also minimal head losses through the pipe or through the system, so that indicates that the pipe sizing is adequate. And the reservoir storage was also found to be sufficient. And then we also just noted a couple of operations and maintenance improvements to the system, which are further described in the report. And with that, I'll pass it off to Soren.
Thanks, Sarah. So from that, we move to determining this supply deficit. So what that is the difference between how much water we can currently supply and how much water is realistically needed. So this figure here illustrates that. As I talked about, the current supply we figure can supply about 0.24 liters per second between the 4 wells. As Sarah calculated, the target demand of 0.54, we picked that to be a realistic and attainable target demand. So this 0.54 is still quite low. It's not quite equivalent to what other regional district systems provide, but it is realistic and attainable, as I mentioned, and it would more than double the existing water supply in Eastbourne. So the difference between that is 0.3 liters per second, and that supply deficit is what we were after in terms of making up either by means of storage or a new source or a combination of the two. So on the storage side, we did look at the possibility of pumping more from those existing wells in the fall and winter when they can provide more, when there is more precipitation. To do that, though, only using the existing sources and pumping all fall and winter, you would need about 4,000 meter cubes of additional storage. So that is equivalent to about 500 more of these tanks. So a lot of storage. Or it's about equivalent to the 2 concrete reservoirs on Reed Road. So a lot of storage would be needed to only do that. So likely not feasible. Some additional storage is recommended that we'll talk about, but in parallel with an additional source of water. Continuing to utilize the existing wells just in the fall and winter doesn't reduce the reliance on precipitation. So with that, we took a look at potential aquifers to use as a new source. So I'll just go over this quite briefly. The province mapped 2 aquifers in Eastbourne. The blue one we see here corresponds to that shallow sand and gravel that the existing wells are in. The flow in that is likely completely tied to precipitation, so not an ideal candidate to continue using. The deeper aquifer, the pink one, which would be underlying the blue as well, is fractured bedrock. The drilled well is likely in this. However, it's the aquifer, the flow is dominated by fractures in the bedrock. So that drilled well likely didn't intersect a good fracture network, whereas some of the other ones on the island have. So the main risk for drilling new wells in this aquifer is really just intersecting those fractures or not. And there's not really enough data to predict with any certainty where those fractures are. Quickly, we did look at existing well records and licenses in the area. So there are some privately owned wells on lots. We didn't look at these in detail, discussing them with residents as it wasn't really part of our scope. We just looked at the well record, but we did send a mail out to residents. So with the results of our study, so if anyone has any feedback, they would be encouraged to contact the regional district through that mail out. The look at existing wells just kind of backed up what we saw in that the fractures in the bedrock are the main drivers of flow and higher yielding wells. This table summarizes the two aquifers. The color coding, generally green is a low risk, yellow is moderate, red is high risk. So we can see here that the bedrock aquifer is the preferred target. Moving to choosing drilling locations, in addition to inspecting a couple of potential locations, we also took a look at a private well that was recently drilled that the owner has approached the regional district to potentially acquire. So we'll talk about that a bit as well. Let's see a picture of the private well and a couple of the sites we inspected to drill. So this private well is pretty close to the treatment plant. The driller estimated the yield at 0.38, so a pretty good well. We're currently in the process of conducting a pumping test. We will be in the coming weeks to confirm that estimate. So the results of that will go a long way in recommendations for next step on whether or not to acquire this well. On top of that, we chose 3 drilling locations. You can see them labeled 1, 2, 3 up here. So these locations were chosen based on land ownership. Most of the land out there is privately owned, so there were only a few spots that we could drill and potentially get easements on. Locations of septic fields, being far enough away from those, closer to some higher yielding well locations, and they're also upslope. So less potential for contamination as well. Those 3 locations in the private well, we looked at the feasibility of them and some high-level estimated costs. So basically all 4 locations were feasible from an engineering perspective, to tie them into the treatment plant. The estimated costs are quite high level at this point, in particular for the 3 sites. Don't take into account the cost savings that you would get from only having 1 drilling rig mobilization, and also with a 30% contingency. But the private well costs also don't take into account whatever the cost of acquiring that well would be, but clearly that well is the most cost-effective option to add to the treatment plant because it is installed already. I'll wrap this up. Some conclusions. The existing wells are going dry. The drilled well shows diminished capacity. So the existing wells can only provide about 0.24 liters per second. Sarah's work on the modeling of the system, it's currently adequate, both to meet existing demands as well as the future target demand. The target demand was chosen to be 0.54, so there's 0.3 liters per second that we need to make up to meet that demand. To make that up, the bedrock aquifer is the best candidate aquifer. The private well is another good option. And on top of that, there's 3 drill sites we identified as well. Recommendations. So first and foremost, analyze the pumping tests that we're going to be doing on that private well to determine next steps for that. If it does look feasible to provide enough water to the system, or even an additional component of making up that supply deficit, then the recommendation is to advance negotiations to acquire that well. On top of that, we are recommending that at least 2 wells are added to the system. So 2 wells are chosen, and regardless of if one can supply the entire supply deficit, we are still recommending 2, and that's primarily for redundancy, and it also helps reduce reliance on precipitation and mitigate some impacts to climate change on those existing wells. 3 of the 4 wells are pretty much fully reliant on precipitation, so particularly in dry years, then that 0.24 liters per second that they provide, realistically might go down in the summer and in times of drought. So 2 wells are recommended, either the private well and 1 new one or 2 new ones. That kind of remains to be seen. But the recommendation is to drill the locations in order of priority that we identified. And it's recommended too for budgeting to assume you're going to drill all 3 locations just for cost savings for rig mobilizations. Drilling 2 wells also reduces costs for license applications. You can get the water rights sooner in time. And finally, the current water demand seems to be a function of the supply. The conservation efforts of the residents there has just been enormous in conserving water. So it remains to be seen if there is additional supply, if that demand goes up as well. So 2 wells helps with the redundancy in that. Alongside those 2 aspects, we are recommending assessing increased water storage. How much storage is kind of dependent on how much the wells can provide, but storage alone during fall and winter with just existing wells, as mentioned, is recommended, but some redundant storage is recommended. Finally, a couple last operational recommendations. Sarah mentioned a few of them, but really ensuring residents are well informed of the realities on the island with water supply and water conservation methods. So like I said, the mail out went out summarizing the results of our study and confirm the capacity of the treatment plant as well to ensure it can meet the demand, and that can be done alongside the storage work as well. So with that, we would be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am looking to see if there are any hands up. Director Seegers.
Thank you. Just going to get back to, I was going back through this. In your conclusion part, one of the recommendations, you're recommending that if the test data from the private well is over 0.1 liters per second, that we look at negotiating. That seems like a low number given what we're looking at as a deficit. So I'm wondering why you would, with that low number, if it's basically you're saying if it's producing water, take it. So just want to comment on that number?
Great question.
Yeah, through the chair. Thanks. It is a low number and really reflects the realities of the water supply on the island. That number is not set in stone. I said it because it is low, but that alone reduces the supply deficit by 1/3. So it still helps, right? And it's still more cost effective than drilling a whole new well, as we saw with our cost estimates. So yeah, I mean, if it's 0.09, I don't know if I would say no, or it's a flexible number, but although it is low, it does help.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It summarizes the situation of Eastbourne, and so that's why I'm asking you, in your experience, how unique is the Eastbourne water system in your experience out there? Like, all reservoir is plastic above ground, on an island, kind of put together for 20, 30 years, and this is what we have. So how unique is this in your experience?
Over to you.
Yeah, through the chair. Thanks. Very, very unique. I think in Sarah and I's experience, the low water demand was very low, very, very low, and was just further eye-opening with the realities of the supply, right? I'm sure if there was more water out there, people would happily use more. The individual storage totes, on the residences themselves, kind of being filled as they could. It's unique. I guess the thing that's not as unique as I'm sure you're seeing in other areas of the regional district as well is the availability of groundwater is the fractured bedrock aquifers are a bit fickle, in that if you hit these fracture networks, they're great, and if you don't, they're not. So water scarcity isn't a unique issue in many places these days. So particularly exacerbated on an island a bit more remote like Keats is. So
Thank you. I see Director Lee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I actually have a couple of questions, but I'll go one at a time. I'm curious about how the arsenic is removed, because it's being done right now. And can the existing plant handle the removal of arsenic from the new existing well and new proposed well? Because if the well we got already's got arsenic, then logically the other three should have as well. So I was wondering about the cost of removing the arsenic and how it's done.
through the chair, thanks. Yeah, I can't speak exactly how the arsenic is removed. I'm not a water treatment expert, unfortunately, but you are right in that there is arsenic in the existing drilled well, so logically it'll be in any new wells as well. So that's part of our recommendation, is to look at the treatment plant and make sure the arsenic removal can handle the additional flows that we would expect to see from the bedrock wells. So part of the drilling and testing program of any new wells is taking the suite of groundwater chemistry samples to hone in on exactly what those concentrations are.
Okay, I see Director Lee will get back to you. Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. Looking in our agenda package on page 18, one of the slides talks about the location evaluations, sites 1, 2, 3 in the private well. You're recommending 2 wells, whether that's 2 drilled wells or the private well and another drilled well. Do you know what sort of cost savings could be expected if we drilled all 3 well sites at once, even if the equipment was installed as part of a future phase or as demand dictated, say?
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, thanks. As far as an exact number for the mobilization goes, I don't know offhand, but you can probably expect to save, on the 10,000-ish kind of range for drilling the existing wells, and that's definitely an option. Once you have the rig out there to drill, let's say 2 sites, and just leave one of them with the well casing intact, it can be used as an observation well, and if needed, you can put the pump in and tie it in at a later date.
Okay, Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. My question is how much do you think is the cost estimate, I guess, inflated or not, or brought higher by the remoteness of the location and needing to barge over the drill and all that kind of stuff?
Over to you.
through the chair, it's definitely inflated with the mobilization costs. No doubt, I would, estimate it's in the tens of thousands, like the cost savings for conducting the one mobilization. So, yeah, it definitely factored into the line item for drilling and testing. Getting rig out there obviously is done fairly regularly. There's been some wells put in recently, but yeah, the mobilization costs are a significant chunk of it.
Thank you. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. In your study, you haven't sort of indicated, but was there any means of measuring the sort of ultimate capacity of the aquifer? Like, for example, in Gibson's, we mapped our aquifer and it has, a potential capacity of maintaining or supplying 10,000 people. Was there any means of determining the size of the aquifer? And the other thing with respect to the aquifer, if you start drawing more on it, is there a potential of salt contamination?
Thank you.
Through the chair, yeah, the aquifer itself, the province is mapped to be underlying the entire island. So as best we can tell, it's underlying the entire island. The total capacity of the aquifer, we didn't look at. We looked at individual well capacities, and the wide range in those really kind of drove home the fracture network of it. So some of those wells that were significantly higher yielding are in these fractures. The main benefit of this aquifer is it's really not heavily used at all. There are some wells on the other side of the island likely drawing into it. But in this area especially, it's not heavily used, so we don't expect to see too much interference from others. As far as saltwater intrusion, absolutely. That's something that's going to have to be looked at in the pumping test. So we'll monitor conductivity and try and see if there is any influence from that. That being said, the wells, this is all anecdotal, but the wells that have been drilled to about 100 meters depth are still reported as being fresh. So there is a significant freshwater pushing down of the salt water there. So there is the potential for saltwater intrusion for sure, but we'll have to look at it from once the wells are in.
Okay, I'm just going to throw one in here before we go back to Director Lee. We just got some drill results back in my area, and it's 440 feet, and we get the results in gallons per minute. And now we're looking at liters per second and meters, and I'm having a hard time with this. Is the industry not on a standard measurement system?
To the chair, I sure wish we were. The problem is, to be honest, water well drillers never really converted. So people like me like liters and meters and all that stuff. But water well drillers are, in my experience, all in feet and all in gallons per minute. So yeah, it basically just causes confusion. But 1 liter per second is about 15 gallons per minute, if that helps.
Yes, I'll have to have a handy conversion chart for these discussions. Over to Director Lee.
Yes, here in Pender we have an island that's 1,300 meters from the mainland, and they actually have run a water line to the municipal system to that island. I was wondering if it has been considered as a practical solution for Keats Island.
Through the chair, it wasn't part of our scope to look at it. Perhaps Remco can discuss that in his discussion, but that wasn't part of our scope, no.
Well, we'll come to the questions for staff in a few minutes here. Any more questions for our consultant? I'm not seeing any right now. Okay, thank you very much for that report. It was very interesting, even if the measurements are confusing. And thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Our next agenda item is, in fact, the report from staff on this very same topic. So over to Mr. Rosenboom.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair McMahon. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the results of the first comprehensive study on the demand and supply situation on Eastbourne since the SRD took over the system about 30 years ago. This Eastbourne system is one of the 4 smaller systems that are part of the regional water system function. While the SRD has been investing in upgrades to the distribution system, significant improvement to this water supply have not been initiated to date. The supply to the residents is currently very limited, and as indicated by the consultant. It cites very significant water restrictions and water conservation measures taken by the residents themselves. Rationing of the water supply is a yearly reality, resulting in an average consumption in summer of well below 200 liters a second, while for the Chapman system, as a comparison, is about 900 liters a second. Based on the findings of the study, staff are recommending the development of 1 additional well to the system to increase the supply to a more reasonable level. Staff are recommending the development of a 2nd well to create redundancy in supply sources, as the productivity of the current wells is decreasing over time, in part due to climate change. Staff suggested it would prepare a 2021 budget proposal for the development of both wells and any auxiliary infrastructure. Thank you, and staff are welcome to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I'm going to lob one out, which may not be entirely an infrastructure question, but all of our sewage plants are individual services so that people who are not on the service do not pay into them. But it seems that Eastbourne is part of the regional service so that everybody is paying into the Eastbourne system. And I was just wondering if we have a policy about these kind of services, or how it came about that we are handling water and sewage so differently.
Thank you for the question. It was a decision that was made when this service was established. The entire area of the SRD falls within the regional water system, actually including North and South Bender. They subsequently decided to create their own function, but in theory they fall within the regional water system as well. So it was a decision made way back when the regional water system function was initiated. Hence, they're part of it, just like Cove K and Earls Cove and Langdale, which are also not connected to the Chapman system.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can see arguments in both directions, but it's in the absence of any sort of overarching policy, it's a little odd. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, along that same vein, I also question the decision that was made 30 years ago where we chose to adopt a water system in a location that's more difficult to reach, in a location that small islands have water issues. That's a well-known fact, and yet all of the water users in the regional water system now get to bear the brunt of that cost without any kind of premium going to the people on the island. I think there should at least be some sort of a remote location surcharge or something to compensate for the fact that those people paid less for their properties because it's harder to access. And I really don't see how that's sort of a fair treatment across the water system. Be happy to take some comments in that regard, but those are some thoughts on my part.
Thank you. I'm just I had one more question for staff, and that is, these days, I don't believe you could develop a subdivision without water source. Does this subdivision predate those kind of rules, or are we creating more subdivisions now with properties that don't have water?
Thank you for the question. On all the subdivisions in Eastbourne were way long ago, and there's no new subdivisions happening at the moment. There are in total about 230 parcels paying parcel tax on the island, and we currently have 175 active users, so people that are actually paying user fees. Some of the people that are paying parcel taxes might have their own well and still pay parcel tax, but are not paying user fee, and hence,
Okay, so does the province require water now when a subdivision is created?
To my knowledge, that's a requirement from the approving authority and not from the province.
Okay, well, that's Modi. Okay, Director Toth.
And or the Island Trust.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. One comment and then one question for staff. With regards to Director Ties, this year saw a 25% increase in the overall water rates. My understanding is that Eastbourne pays those same rates that I do here in Sechelt. So over time, they have been contributing probably more to the regional water system than they have been sort of requiring back in work. This seems like it would be a pretty low maintenance system that they have in place right now. My question for staff, could an RFP for drilling be put together in such a way that proponents would have flexible scheduling if they had other jobs on the island, things like that, we could save on mobilization costs?
Staff, please.
Thank you for the question. Yes. The answer is yes. And the answer is yes. However, it will be harder for us to actually confirm then when we would have some results coming out of it. But there is, of course, there's room to have those kind of discussions. And usually they also take place because we always look at, like, if a driller often indicates, hey, I'm gonna have to go to the Sunshine Coast next week anyway, can we delay your project a week?
Thank you. Director Lee.
I have a whole bunch of questions, of course, and a few thoughts. I'd like to get an answer to my first question, though, about running a water main from the mainland to the island, because my logic is that it's 1,200 meters from Gibsons to Keats, and it's 1,300 meters from Pearson to the mainland. So it seems a fairly similar situation, except in Pearson, the owner had to pay for running the water line, but he had the option of drilling or running, so he run the water line. So it seems like it must be possibly a cost-effective solution, and especially in Keats, because there's a whole bunch of, from a very high level, whether it's true or not, there's a whole bunch of subdivisions all over that island that could benefit from having a consistent source of water, not just the Eastbourne. So I was wondering if we considered that aspect.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I hear two questions there, and I will answer them both. One is the land linkage. It has not been considered in detail. There has been other islands. We are actually also surfing, for example, Trail Island, and it's doing that through a connection with the mainland as well. So we've done it in other places. In this case, it would require a connection or from the Elphinstone area or from Langdale, Grantham's area. So it will be longer than 1,200 meters because we, of course, would not be able to use Gibson's water. We would need to run it out of one of our systems. And it might require some upgrades to systems on this side to get the water even there. And when it's on Keats, it's need to go to the other side of Keats because it's the wrong side of Keats where it's landing. So the additional cost might be significantly higher than only putting the cable, putting the pipeline in as well. But a detailed feasibility study has never been completed.
Okay.
And the second question is about other uses on Keats. There are other licenses, water license holders, subdivisions on Keats, but none of them are part of the SJD water system. And so they would have to join the SJD water system, and to date, they have not been willing to do so.
Thank you.
Sure. Director Lee, you're the only one with your hand up, so... Oh, wait. There's Director Hiltz. Your turn, Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. A question about the recommendation in the budget proposal. So is the expectation that it's only one option presented through the budget proposal, or would there be a series of phasing of the budget proposal, or how would that kind of what's the, I'm trying to understand the middle and that, what would be in the scope of, would there be some options in there as we move forward so people can kind of see the different, we might not want to go for the whole basket, we might want to go just for a couple pieces of the basket. So is that built in there, or where would that discretion come from?
Yeah.
I have to mute myself. Thank you for the question. Of course, there is a wide variety possible here. What is currently suggested in the recommendation is to, as you can call it, go full in. And the reason for that is it would allow for the shortest timeline to get to a supply. Otherwise, if you break it up in pieces, it might take 1 or 2 years longer. That's the reason why this is recommended currently. An alternative could be that, as discussed as part of the presentation and the question and answers with the consultant, is you could develop one well, drill more, find a second well, develop one, and develop a second one later. That's an alternative. So there are options to be considered, and an alternative. If requested, staff could also outline some of those options as part of a budget proposal and have several budget requests included in there. So then the recommendation would be way shorter, is that staff prepare to enter in the budget proposal for the drilling and development of 2 test wells, and the middle part then can be excluded and and provide several options for the testing and development of 2 test wells, and then we'll provide those options as part of a budget proposal.
Good.
Hope that clarifies.
Thank you. Over to Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I have a fairly simple question. Actually, I got a bunch more still. It mentions there's an operator that hands out the water. I was just kind of curious who that operator was. Is it a local person, or do we send someone over there? Or
Yeah. You're muted.
Sorry. Given the unique circumstances that we're operating it on an island, we have retained the services of a local contractor that is operating the service on our behalf and to our standards. So it's a local operator with our oversight and support.
Thank you. It must be a tough job. I'm glad I don't have it. The other question that I have is that it was mentioned that we need more water for in case of fire. I was wondering if it would be more cost effective to put a series of fire hydrants hooked to a salt water pump rather than increasing the fresh water supply. I was wondering if that had been considered. The reason I mention that is that in Saginaw Lake, in the private companies or the private properties that are not serviced on our water, they've done that very same thing. So, but they have fresh water, and here we're talking salt water.
Thank you for the question. We didn't look at that because this was not a feasibility study to explore options to increase, to even get some kind of fire protection to the island. But the water distribution system is also not capable of providing fire flow, so it would also require, your suggestion would also require the installation of an entire fire flow distribution system. And it's with salt water, so I'm not sure how it works with rust, etc. But it was outside of the scope of this study.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I'm looking at moving the recommendations, but I am interested in some kind of phased option after the semicolon, just to whether other directors would be interested in that information coming forward. So I'm just thinking, could it just be options for phasing the full basket, something like.
What we could do is end of staff prepare a 2021 budget proposal for several options, including phasing for the drilling, testing, and development, and then the rest of the recommendation.
Okay, that would be the motion that I would move then.
Good.
I'll second that. Yeah.
I saw seconders. Excellent. We have a motion on the floor. I'm liking it. Do we have any discussion on the motion on the floor? Director Toth, are you waving at me? Yes.
Sorry. Council, we just wave at each other. So, yeah, anyways. The one thing that I didn't hear from Director Hiltz was whether he was also moving the last and further that, because it wasn't expressly stated, so I just wanted to check that.
Director Hiltz.
Yeah, I would assume I would leave that in. Yeah, I'm just looking at the scope of the middle section. But thank you for that. I think it's okay the way it stands. If it's clear to staff and it's clear to what we're going to be voting on, I'm happy with it.
Okay, I'm not hearing any protests voiced. I'm not seeing any further hands. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Thank you very much. That passes. And thank you, staff, for an insight into Eastbourne. This moves us along to the next item on our agenda, which is the contract for dam safety reviews. And over to Mr. Mizurek.
Thank you, committee. Sorry. Thank you, committee chair McMahon and committee members. Presented for your review and approval is a consultant contract amendment to complete the following additional out-of-scope work items. Preliminary engineering and a detailed structural stability analysis for both the Edwards and Chapman Lake dams. And based upon the results of the stability analysis, complete a design engineering report of the necessary dam structural improvements, along with a Class C or better cost estimate. These cost estimates would serve as the basis for a budget proposal for the construction of these improvements in later 2021 and 2022. Staff recommends the committee recommend to the board approval of this contract with WSP Inc. Canada as summarized in this staff report. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. It was pointed out to me that the reason that this proposal is here is because the additional funds now make it over $100,000, which comes to the board. I am Director Seegers.
I'll move the recommendations as presented on page 112.
And I see that is seconded. Do we have any discussion of the recommendations? Wow, this is fast. All right, wait. Director Hiltz, you're waving.
Yeah, I am waving. Yeah, I just want to say, in terms of overall safety, that this dam will, this information will provide some measure of safety. And I asked staff about the relationship with the Cleveland Dam, and I think we need to take responsibility of our own dams here. Okay, so we're taking responsibility of our dams. This is regulatory, and yeah, it's definitely overdue, I think, as well. So yeah, I'm totally supportive.
Yes, it did cross my mind that we're inspecting them every 50 years, whether they need it or not. So okay, all in favor of the motion on the floor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We look forward to the report on the condition of the dams.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program. And I believe that is Mr. Rosenboom.
Yeah, it's me and Jim Hall, and he just joined as well. So staff identified opportunities for applications under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Rural and Northern Development Grant Program. This program is jointly funded by the provincial and federal government, and based on the eligibility criteria and status of the SRD project, to apply for a grant under this program. One is for capital replacements on several docks in Area A, and the other one is for several upgrades to our Wood Creek wastewater treatment system. Staff identified an error on page 120 of the report, where in the conclusion section it mentioned that the value of the porch project is $325,000, while on page 119 it's mentioned that it is over $600,000. And over $600,000 is the correct amount. Staff would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Very significant projects. Director Toth.
Not directly related to these particular projects, but related to this grant program. This is a fairly new program, is my understanding, and a fairly rapid turnaround. Is there any eligibility for either our well programs or Church Road or anything like that to apply through this program as well for funding?
Staff?
Thank you. We looked at all the options, and one of the criteria for this grant is that you cannot start to work prior to the grant being awarded, and hence the Church Road well is not eligible. Future intakes, if available, might provide further opportunities for supply source expansion projects.
Thank you. I see Director Seegers.
Sorry, I'm just getting muffin delivery as my granddaughter is here baking. I'm totally, again, separate from the projects that are here. How did you determine these are the projects to apply? I mean, I understand the criteria. Are these the only two that qualified? Are they, are there others and these are the ones that are most pressing? I mean, I understand the issue with Wood Creek wastewater system, indicating that it's out of compliance at times. I guess I'm just looking at what was your criteria? How did you determine that these are the two? Because this is, I mean, it's 100% funding, is it not, for this? So that's a significant impact for, I mean, Wood Creek residents, awesome, right? But why these?
The criteria, one of the criteria is that there needs to be a certain level of design confirmed. And so these are two projects where we are getting to a stage where we have design in such a state that we actually can more or less have a class C estimate or B estimate in hand that we can submit with the application for funding. And that's what we needed. So there are feasibility studies ongoing for 3 other wastewater plants. However, they have not reached the stage yet that we actually can indicate, okay, this is what's needed. That's what the cost estimate will be. So it's just that these 2 projects are in a state that we have some kind of design and a cost estimate associated with them that we can apply for.
Okay, and just follow up then. I think this is something that we were talking about in the spring when we said that we needed to continue to move forward with getting projects shovel ready. I don't think we're at a place where this type of quick turnaround is gone away. I think the federal government is going to be focusing on this at least through next year to do community economic development. So I would like to see in the upcoming budget that we actually have some money set aside to do some projects and get them to the place where they're shovel ready, so that when these opportunities come forward, we can jump on them. If we don't have that work done, then we can't. The word that we're getting from our MP is that this will be a focus going forward, and it's going to continue until we start seeing the Canadian economy turning around. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Seegers. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to continue on the theme on why these 2. And my interpretation is this is actually a success of the asset management plan that the regional district has been moving forward, is that this ideally tells us what projects we're going to be doing. So the economic development, I don't think we really have an asset management plan on the economic recovery side. So whether, I don't know how you go from the tangible capital asset to the softer things that Director Seegers has talked. So I'm interested in, do we have an equivalent process for that? But yeah, to me, it's just asset management all over this. This is what we need to be doing more and more, so we're absolutely ready when things are coming along. But it's that softer side that Director Seegers was talking about that I don't know. How do you get the softer sides of projects ready? I don't know what that would look like.
I see our CAO.
Hi there. Thank you for the question, Director Hilton. Mayor Seegers brought up a good point as well. One of the challenges around being in a position to respond successfully to grant applications, especially when these programs drop with little warning and tight turnarounds, and it's always the pattern. You have very little time to respond. So there's what I call a grant readiness continuum. And you've got all these projects and you've got this continuum of readiness to be ready to apply for a grant, not just to apply because the program dropped, but to be able to have a project that's actually so competitive that it's highly likely to be successful. And it requires a tremendous amount of front-loaded work by staff to move those projects along that continuum. And so one of the challenges we have, especially because everyone's going hair straight back playing catch up, is we have now this revamped strategic priorities of the board. We've got some staffing coming on board. We've got all these capacity issues, and we have all these projects that are moving forward. So one of the things that's a challenge for us as staff is to move them along this continuum so that when the right program drops, even if it was a project we didn't plan to do this year, we're in a really good position to be able to have a competitive application potentially for a project that might be the perfect fit for that program a bit earlier than we'd anticipated. It's a real delicate balance, and it's something that we're just going to have to fight our way through, because we want to be able to outcompete some of the other people that have really important projects as well, when these programs, even though they're massive, are always chronically oversubscribed, and each one has a little different criteria. The bullseye is a little different, so you have to be able to describe your project through a slightly different lens sometimes to make it more competitive. So for this intake, we picked the projects that we thought were the furthest down that continuum and had the highest probability of success based on the factors of the program, even if they might not have been, in a perfect world, the project we would have presented if we had more time, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. I notice I'm having some video issues here, so I'm not sure whether it's me or whether it's the system getting a little bit overloaded, but if I start fading out, please tell me. I will comment that as a system for funding critical infrastructure, having municipalities compete against each other for the most desperate municipality does not strike me as a brilliant system. However, over to Director Lee.
Sorry, Chair, I was going to comment on something similar, but you put it in very plain English. Of course, I was wondering if in fact, for me, like there's a water mains replacement in all of the old established areas that are kind of desperate because poles keep popping up everywhere. And it seems like we could have picked one of those as well. So the question is the same one: is how is the prioritized? How are the projects prioritized, and what are they, and how do we get to understand what's the potential to leap on any grant that comes along? And I don't know the answer to that. It's just a rhetorical question. I guess it's something we need to consider in the future. I have another question though, and that is that there's two separate asks in the recommendation. I believe one I can vote on because that's the Wood Creek Park one. The other one is the ports though, and I believe I can't vote on that. If I voted on the parks, or the ports, would that be something bad? And so I shouldn't vote on either one, or could someone let me know here?
Great question. Great procedure question. Staff?
I think staff checked with the corporate officer because it's related to finance of where they can vote on it. It's not related to a service level.
Good. Thank you very much. Perhaps at some future time we could take a look at this grant readiness continuum of which you speak, CAO. So maybe associated with budget at some point would be a good time to just get an idea of what our pipeline looks like. Okay. Do I see any motions on the floor? Director Seegers.
I'll move the recommendations as on page 115.
And I see that seconded by Director Kroll. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All in favor? Good. None opposed. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And now we are on to water services, pipes, valves, and fittings. Over to staff, please.
Thank you very much, Chair McMahon. The Utility Services Department requires an inventory of pipes, valves, and fittings to maintain the water and wastewater systems. In 2016, the SRD signed a contract with Iconics to supply and deliver this inventory for a period of 3 years with 2 additional 1-year extensions. This proposed extensions will be the final one for this contract. Staff are satisfied with the level of service and quality of the materials supplied, which includes shipping and delivery at no cost, which is an added value to the SCRD. Iconics has provided updated pricing for the term ending October 2021, and staff have evaluated the submission and found the pricing to be acceptable. Having a reliable supply of pipes, valves, and fittings is important to a utility service as SCRDs having, and has a benefit of having a good inventory management and makes restocking way more efficient. Staff are therefore recommending the right to extend the contract for an additional final 1 year. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. The report is clear. I'm glad you're happy with these people, and they're doing an amazing job for us. I'm going to move the recommendation on page 121.
And I see a seconder, Director Tyes. Do we have any further discussion of pipes, valves, and fittings? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes. Thank you very much. And we can move on to the contract award for recycling depot site operations in Pender Harbor for PPP. Over to staff.
I think you're skipping one agenda item 7.
Did I? Okay. That's right. I beg your pardon. It's not, of course, because it's a verbal report. It's not in the sidebar of my PDF. I beg your pardon. We're on to the topic of Facebook lately, which is curbside food waste collection. And update from Robin Cooper.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Thank you. So I've prepared a brief update regarding the Green Bin program, or the Curbside Food Waste Collection program, for today. So the Green Bin program launched as expected on October 6th, 7th, and 8th. So that was last week. And garbage is now collected every other week. So in terms of where we're at for the launch, so for our single family homes, so those are the homes that are collected curbside, there are still some green bins that are awaiting delivery. Primarily those are for our new start, so new builds. For our 2 multi-families, so that's where the materials are collected in one large bin. It has been implemented at Roberts Creek Co-housing. And for Secret Cove Landing, they're currently building an enclosure. So once that's finalized, then it will launch there. For outreach and engagement, so inside each of the green bins was a copy of our new curbside collection guide. It is also available online, or we can mail it to residents if they would like. Also inside the green bin was a What's In sticker, which is available as a PDF online, or we could also mail that to residents if they would like. We have a dedicated web page, as was updated last month. We keep that up to date, primarily the frequently asked questions. So as we are finding questions, whether that's online, through phone, or through email, we're updating the frequently asked questions with the date at the top of the page and keep adding to them. As well as social media updates. We are in the testing phase of the SCRD Collects app, and we're hoping to have that launched either in the next few days or early next week. And then for our video series, those are in development. For preliminary results. So this is the results from last week as well as the first 2 days of this week. So last week we had a total of 9.69 tons of food waste collected over the 3 days. And then so far this week, so for Tuesdays and Wednesdays collection, we're at 6.4 tons. And just noting that this data does not include the Roberts Creek Co-housing or Secret Cove Landing, because they're collected in a different method. So those materials are collected into a truck, automated, and are mixed with other commercial customers of waste management. So what about garbage? So this is 2 weeks of garbage, 2 weeks ago, so the last week before the green bin, and then the first week of green bin collection. So we did see a reduction in garbage collected. from just over 33 tons to just over 25 tons. So we had staff, we had one PMAC volunteer, as well as the Wild Safe BC coordinator. So conducting some participation surveys last week and this week, which are the first 2 weeks of service. From waste management and Salish soils, no major concerns at all with contamination, which is great news. Some things that were found inside of the green bins were some pet litter or pet waste and some recyclables. So for example, some magazines or cereal boxes were found. So in those cases, if the materials could be removed, then they were left behind and the food waste were emptied. Otherwise, it would have been tagged and left behind by waste management. And then at Salish soils, really the only things we saw were some produce stickers, as well as some packaged food. So for example, there was a full bag of potatoes that was still in its plastic packaging. And this is a photo of the contents of the green bin being emptied into the truck. And this is a photo of the contents of the truck being emptied at Salish soil last week. This was the first day, so this was Tuesday's load. And this is an up-close photo of the contents from last Thursday being tipped up at Salish soils. So you can see lots of paper bags, lots of different types of food waste. So some of it is avoidable food waste, such as that uneaten zucchini, and then others are sort of some food scraps and leftovers. So feedback to date, so we're receiving feedback via phone, via email, as well as on social media. The types of inquiries that staff are receiving, so we have received positive feedback around the guide, around the program itself, questions around what's included in the green bin, so that connects back to our frequently asked questions. We have had some opt-out inquiries, questions around what types of bags can be used, where do they purchase the paper bags. In terms of the container, we have received some feedback that it's too large for the amount of food waste being produced. Feedback around some wildlife, specifically bears that have accessed some green bins. We also have received some serious concerns from residents regarding every other week garbage, and that's related to both volume as well as frequency. So there's some residents that are saying that they're diverting all their food waste, they're recycling everything they can, and they're still producing one garbage bag per week. So that's a volume concern, and then a frequency concern would be not wanting to store the garbage for 2 weeks. And we have had quite a bit of interest in curbside recycling. In terms of next steps, so doing a more thorough evaluation of the first 2 weeks of service. So staff will be looking at what was the participation like, evaluating the food waste tonnage, as much data as we can over the next several weeks, as well as looking at the garbage tonnage. And then we're going to be preparing a report for a November committee of this year. And in regards to wildlife concerns, we're aware that province-wide there has been an increase in bear activity this year. And we have received inquiries around the same level around this time of year as it related to garbage, as it relates to green bin this year. And we're actively working with Wild Safe BC to assist residents, as well as our service provider, to explore are there opportunities to help mitigate the risks of occurrence. And thank you, and staff are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
You're muted, Donna.
Yeah, no, I thought I had hit that button, but I didn't. So, thank you for the presentation, and the first hand up I see is Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. Thank you so much, Robin, for the presentation. And yes, of course, we've been reading a lot of different comments on social media, and I've received a few comments as well. So I'm glad to see staff has, seen a lot of the questions around the opt-out from residents. Probably the biggest thing, though, that I've heard is the missing containers that are going missing either from animals or have been damaged either through animal use or animal like a bear, or there have been a couple of reports of them being, of the containers being damaged just through pickup and being dropped. And my assumption then is that if there is a damaged container, residents can just contact the SCRD, and would they be able to get a replacement, and how soon that would be able to happen?
Thank you. Staff?
Thanks for the question. Yes, staff would, our residents would contact the SCRD through the infrastructure email, so infrastructure@scrd.ca, or the 604-885-6806, and we would work with the resident to determine how to replace that container.
Thank you. Director Ties.
Thank you, Chair. And this may be a question I can find the answer to in some of the documentation you sent with the thing. But where do you get the brown bags again, and where can you buy them?
Staff.
Thanks for the question. Almost every retailer on the Sunshine Coast, we do have a list in that FAQ. So depending on where you live or where your preferred shopping locations, it's at Rona and all locations, Home Hardware, both locations, Clayton's, Canadian Tire, London Drugs.
Super. Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. And this is the beginning of good things in terms of the number, lowering what gets buried in the landfill. Those early numbers are very, very positive. Going back over the years, when I first moved here, it was 2 cans per week. Then we're down to 1 can per week. Now we're to 1 can every other week. So I'm having to change my household processes, and I wasn't quite prepared for that. So I'm usually the garbage detail person, so I'm having to pay attention to the schedule and looking forward to the app coming out. And anecdotally, in my neighborhood, we've got some improper roads where garbage cans end at the end, and it was the garbage can that was tipped over, not the green waste. So I think we just have some bumps at the beginning, but overall, I'm in my neighborhood, it looks good.
Thank you. I'm just going to relay a few questions that I got. I do think that as much as possible, we need to make it clear that the bins belong to the property, so that, when you sell your property, you will be expected to pass the green bin on to the next owner. Because I noticed there's a certain small number of people in my area who have not picked up their bins. They've left them at the end of the driveway because they don't intend to use them. But, they should still pick them up and store them somewhere. I had some questions about secondary suites and whether there are 2 bins where there's more than 1 dwelling on a property. Could you answer that one?
Thanks for the question. If the dwelling has a suite registered with the SCRD, then they would have, or secondary dwelling, then they would have 2 services applied to their utility bill or their utility count. Therefore, they would have 2 green bins.
So I'm just going to follow that up. How do you know whether the suite is, say you buy a house, how do you know whether the suite is registered, and how do you register it? Like, what is the procedure for this?
Thanks for the question. Those types of inquiries would be routed through the SCRD's building department for follow-up.
Okay. And finally, are staff working with residents who say that biweekly garbage pickup is not sufficient? There was a long thread on Facebook a while ago by somebody who said that, her household was producing more than a can, well, at least a can a week of garbage. And folks who were on the thread kept asking what was in this garbage and never got any answer. And that puzzles me a bit too. Like I suppose if you had a lot of incontinent pets and babies, you could do this. But I'd be interested in what are the challenges faced by people who really need more than one bin a week. Any observations so far?
No, thanks for the question. That's a great question. We've heard from folks that have many cats. So kitty litter has been one of the primary concerns, and that's more of a weight, not necessarily a volume, because there is a 1 bag limit or 1 can limit, but there's also a weight limit, which hasn't changed, but that's 20 kilos or 44 pounds. And then the other item is diapers. In terms of a volume or weight concerns. So when staff are talking to the residents, we do share what the other options are, which the extra garbage tag is available. That has not changed. So the cost of that is $2.50, as well as if a resident has multiple extra bags of garbage, then it might be more feasible to self-haul it to the Seashell landfill, where the $5 minimum would apply.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I left my hand up because even though Robin partly answered the question there on what sort of waste went in, our family of 3 puts out our garbage can every like 4 to 6 weeks. And we don't create green waste. We do our own composting, and we've got a food cycler to take care of the rest. So to hear about people that are, filling more than a garbage can every week, or they just don't have enough room with the systems we have, I find astonishing. But knowing that cat litter, for example, is a big component of that because of the weight, that makes a lot of sense. But stop making so much garbage, people.
Thank you for your advice. I see Director Hiltz.
Yes, thanks, Chair. In terms of the extra can coupons, is there any tracking of that? Does the contractor track those numbers to see if those numbers are going, like, how do we know how many extra cans are going out there, and where are the stats on that?
Thank you. Staff, please.
Thanks for the question. They are tracked by the SCRD. So we are able to track the sales of the extra tags, and that will be incorporated into the forthcoming report. And then also moving forward to track if there are more sales, say in 2021 versus 2020 or 2019.
Super. Thank you. Follow up, Director Hiltz?
Yeah, so on the on the bi-weekly system, we don't really have an accurate number. We just have the sales of the coupons, not actually the current use. So there's no, they don't anecdotally report that at all in terms of their, it's not a requirement of reporting in their service.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. Staff will follow up with our service provider to confirm what data they do or don't collect as it relates to when the material is collected at the curb, as opposed to just the sale.
Thank you. Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of a few people have expressed it as the amount of garbage that goes into actual garbage. We had the the compost recycling here in Gibson's. Our garbage is less than a can every 2 weeks, and the problematic issue is kitty litter. It's about the only thing that's in there. The town of Gibson's also introduced a bylaw sort of creating a fine procedure for putting recyclables into garbage. And I'm just wondering if this is something the regional district should be considering, looking at the life expectancy of the landfill. And the only other thing I wanted to inquire is why the app didn't roll out with the system, because it is a bit of an adjustment for people to get used to a new garbage day for their curbside composting, and the app certainly does help. So I'm just wondering, was there a problem with it, or that it didn't roll out with the system?
Thank you. Over to staff.
Thanks for the question. Timing on procurement and working diligently to make sure that the app has been thoroughly reviewed by staff, as well as the waste wizard, or the what goes where component. So we're still finalizing, making sure that if a resident selects an item, that where it directs residents to pick it up is accurate. So again, we are anticipating either, oh, I guess today's Thursday, so early next week it should be launched.
Thank you. And what about the question, are we contemplating any bylaw amendments to make it an offense to put recycling in the garbage? Staff?
Thanks for the question. If this is something that the board would like to consider, then upcoming reports regarding the program or regarding landfill bans, this could be incorporated for consideration.
Okay. Oh, there we go. More questions. Director Kroll. Director Kroll, you're muted.
Sorry, trying to do two things at once here. I would actually like to make a motion that staff do consider looking at a, a ban on recycling in garbage. Looking at the life expectancy of the landfill, I think we have to take more drastic measures.
Do I see a seconder for that motion? Yes, I see a seconder. All right. Staff.
In just a piece of context, as directed by the board, staff will undertake this in upcoming months, also a questionnaire about implementation of curbside recycling services. And my suggestion to the board would be to include this option of a curbside ban in garbage, that we included in our report back on that questionnaire. So it is one package, because and in a way they are connected to each other.
Okay. Do we have any further discussion of the motion on the floor? Director Seegers.
Thank you. While I agree that at some point we may want to do that, Gibson's just passed theirs, and they actually started composting, organics collection earlier in the year. So I think we need to give people time to get familiar with the service and to, make sure we have the uptake, address all of the concerns and issues, etc. So while I'm in favor of putting something like this, I'm not looking at having it be implemented right away. I think we need to look at a later implementation.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Well, it sounds like a noble idea. I think we need to consider that not all areas have curbside pickup and curbside recycling. And in an area like Pender Harbor and Egmont, it's quite a journey for some older people that are not mobile to do that. We need to be careful what we're doing with that. And the other part is, do we really need more bylaw enforcement and how to collect the bylaws at this point? We got enough trouble with our existing enforcement. So I'm kind of speaking with the fact that it's a great idea, but I think we need to revisit it when the situation is correct. That's my thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Lee, who does not want to send our bylaw officers out to inspect people's garbage. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. We can produce a ban, or we can implement a ban or change the bylaw. We don't need, as government, to be the one to be the collector for the curbside recycling. We can always let it go to private market. Rather, we can still put in a ban. We need to be bold, as we say in our strategic plan. we need to move things forward. We need to, we're way too close to a landfill catastrophe with it being so close to capacity. So I'm in favor of looking forward to this, of doing bylaw changes, about looking at bans, and moving things forward. It takes time to implement, so we can start these changes now, because I think it gives a lot of, we can plan a timeline after. So I mean, we are so far beyond the time to make these changes. We've had our solid waste management plan in effect for a very long time, and we've only, as a board, we've only started moving some of this stuff forward because things were waylaid by previous boards. It's beyond time to move some of this stuff forward. I'm in favor of bylaw bans on recycling, letting private market pick things up. We don't, the SCRD doesn't look after pickup of garbage in Area A, yet a private contractor is taking care of that. There are other private contractors that can take care of picking up curbside recycling for residents that don't want to or are unable to do it on their own. We don't need to do this as a government program.
Okay, Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Wholeheartedly agree with what Director Pratt has said here. There are a lot of other jurisdictions that don't do any curbside garbage collection. Yes, as a regional district, we're responsible for the landfill, but beyond that, free market can take care of a lot of these things. I wish we could have implemented a ban on organics and recyclables 10 years ago, not, a year or two from now. There is really no, we don't have time to delay it, so to speak. And I think the sooner we can get these things out of our landfill, the better. If people will find a way, free market will find a way. As government, we don't have to be the solution to everything. Just increased costs for the taxpayers, and it sort of results in that one-size-fits-all service that a lot of people that have been asking about opt-out have complained about. If we had an organics ban in place 10 years ago and free market was taking care of it now, we might not even need to have done a curbside organics program. Free market options might have been sufficient. So just my thoughts.
Right. Over to Director Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of in follow-up to what Director Seegers and Director Pratt were saying, I think at this point, the really important thing is you have people's attention right now with the organics program, and it's a great opportunity just to focus on the whole issue of what we're throwing out. We've found in our own home that we think more about what we even bring into the home. Quite often you'll see me ripping apart packaging at London Drugs or Canadian Tire and leaving the packaging in the store because I don't want the responsibility of having to recycle it. If I can reduce it at source, so much the better. And stores, will take certain stuff back and also get back to their suppliers and say, hey, we don't need the packaging, change it. So I think because we're on the threshold of an awareness, Gibson's actually our organics program, I think has been going for close to 2 years now. There have been some issues, but there is an awareness. So I think any opportunity we can take to make people aware of what is recyclable. The other issue, when you go to curbside recycling, there is a huge contamination rate. And I think if people do the individual separation and recycling and take it to a depot, so much the better.
Okay, folks, I think we're getting a bit into the weeds, although I have this irresistible picture in my head of Councillor Kroll carrying out each individual roll of toilet paper from the store. But I'm going to put this over to staff, please. Mr. Rosenboom.
Thank you. Just as a reminder for the board, there are 2 board resolutions on the books. to implement an organics ban and a recycling ban at the landfill. We're planning to bring a report forward in one of the upcoming meetings this year with timelines and scope of what it would look like. Maybe that's an opportunity to also advance this discussion further.
And I agree. So, Director Lee, unless you have really something pressing to say, I was going to call the question on this. Okay, thank you very much. I'm calling the question. Wait.
Can you read, can we have a reread of it, please?
What am I calling the question on? Can our recording secretary help me out here?
I have notes that a bylaw amendment to implement a ban on recycled material in the garbage, but not a formulated motion.
Okay. I think it would just be expeditious if we could vote this down and discuss it when the staff report comes forward. So I am going to call the question.
Sorry, excuse me, then process. According to our recording secretary, she does not have a motion on the floor at this point. There is nothing to vote down.
Oh. Well, in that case, if we do not have a motion on the floor and don't have to vote it down, we could actually take a break for 10
Well, on a process standpoint, just because the recording secretary doesn't have that recorded, the chair recognized the motion and a seconder. So technically there is a motion on the floor.
Okay, even if we're not sure what it is.
Even if we're not quite sure what it is, but there is one there, and just also as a point of order, if staff already has direction on this item, I would say the chair's advice on letting it vote down or just letting it go is probably the best way to go at this point.
All right. Can I call the question on this now? Are we all good? All in favor of the motion on the floor? Great. Nobody's in favor. Awesome. That's the first time I think I've ever had that happen. All opposed. Look at this. We're all opposed. Excellent. That dies a terrible death. All right. It is 11:13 a.m. Can we please take a 10-minute break and we'll be back at 1:23.
You mean 11:23, not 1:23.
We'll take 1:23.
Okay, welcome back everybody to the infrastructure meeting of October the 15th, 2020. We are now on Annex F, the contract award for recycling depot site operations in Pender Harbor for PPP, sorry, not PPE, that's different. Over to staff, please.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. The SUD has a contract with Recycle BC to provide regional depot recycling services for residential packaging and paper products, or PPP. The SCRD has 3 separate contracts to operate the depots, one in Pender Harbor, one in Seashelt, and one in Gibsons. These contracts are set to expire on November 30th, 2020, and as such, a request for proposals was issued for these services. No proposals were received for the Pender Harbor location, so an invitational RFP process was initiated with the current service provider. The purpose of this report is to outline the outcome of that invitational RFP process and award a contract for SCRD depot recycling services in Pender Harbor. Thank you, and staff welcome the opportunity to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. And I see a hand from Director Lee.
Thank you, Director, Chair McMahon. Let me get this good. I'd like to make a motion to accept the recommendations as presented on page 124.
Second.
And I see a seconder, Director Kroll. Thank you very much. Do we have any further discussion of the recommendations? I was very happy to see reference to a living wage. That's a good thing on the Sunshine Coast right now. Not seeing any hands, so I am going to call the question. All in favor of the recommendations? Any opposed? I see none opposed. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item is contract award for PPP. Over to staff.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. That's the item that we just discussed. Thanks.
No, I have, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, old report. I really shouldn't rely on the left-hand menu here on my PDF. All right, so we're up to Islands Cleanup Program 2020 update. Over to staff.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. The purpose of this report is to provide an update regarding participation of residents during the 2020 Nelson Island Cleanup event, as per recommendation 28420, and to seek direction from the board on future service levels. Thank you, and staff are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Okay, I see Director Tice.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. One is sort of a wondering if, due to the provision of this service, that habits are changing among the residents. Maybe in the past, when they knew that whatever they packed in, they had to pack out, their habits would be different than now, knowing that they're going to get picked up. They can basically haul anything they want in there and then eventually get rid of it. So I'm just looking at it through the lens of climate change. That doesn't seem to be like a good initiative in that case. At the same time, I acknowledge that people would want a fridge and then eventually need to get rid of that fridge. So I can see both sides of that equation. But my specific question is that the take-up in tonnage was similar to other areas on Nelson Island. The cost was almost twice as much per household. So I'm wondering if there's room on the barge to stay with biannual there, and I know that will make it more difficult for special items, but considering the cost per household, I'm tempted to go in that direction.
Are there any comments from staff on that? Okay, I'm going to go over to Director Lee.
Yes, I'd like to start by commenting on Director T's. I myself wonder if we are doing the right thing by having an overall islands cleanup, but I think that's a different issue. And this one here is simply whether we continue with annual on Nelson Island, which I think we should. And the second part, I have a question in that Hardy Island, which is less than a rock's throw from Nelson Island, and in fact forms part of the bay, Blind Bay, where a pickup already occurs, and they would like to be included in the pickup as well. So I guess not only would I like to see the Nelson Island continue on an annual basis, I'd also like to see Hardy Island added, or else we cancel the program altogether. Those are the way I see it. I would point out that we do pay our share of everything. So
I'm just going to ask a clarifying question. So you mean adding the properties on Hardy Island, but not necessarily adding another stop? Is that what you're saying?
It would actually add another stop. They would have to go to a different wharf. Yes.
Okay.
It is separated. There's no connection. It wouldn't increase the cost very much, though, because the boat's already there. The cost is to get the barge there. And so it would increase the tonnage without increasing the cost significantly.
Do staff have any comment on whether it would increase the cost of delivering the service?
Thanks for the question. Staff do anticipate that there may be additional contracted services costs. Staff would have to confirm with the service provider adding that service and what that would look like from a cost perspective. But staff could do that and bring that forward for the committee or board's consideration.
Thank you very much. I see Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I am supportive of the way the wording is right now. The adding islands for me is a bit of scope creep at this point in time, and this is about maintaining the existing level of service. And if I remember, this is looking at it back in the crisis management of the COVID time, was to kind of how do we knock back the tax increase. So that was how I understood this to be framed. So. And the uptake on the island was that how much is there. So there's obviously a need. So at this point, I'm just prepared to support the recommendations as presented. Because I'm nervous about the scope creep at this point, especially having it just brought up. So it's a little fast for me.
Okay, Director Ties is next.
Yeah, I reflecting on my previous comment about, looking at it through the lens of climate change and considering that the garbage that we're picking up is not in any way, there's no real timeline on other than it being unsightly. This is not immediate need of disposal. I think because once a year or once every 2 years, doesn't really make that much of a difference. I personally am for option 3, and as long as it eventually gets removed, I'm okay with that.
I don't think I'm clear on what option 3 is.
Option 3 is just make it biannual for everybody.
I see. All right. Next on the list is Director Toth hasn't spoken on this topic yet, so over to you.
I love talking trash. Thank you, Chair. One concern I do have with option 3 at the top of page 136 mentions that special items would be collected every 4 years instead of every other year. So if your fridge died a week after pickup, you're holding onto it for 4 years, which is not very much less than ideal. I'm curious, as a question for Director Lee, how many residents are there on Hardy Island? And perhaps that's a motion that could be brought forward after we deal with the items in the report.
50 lots, and they're all serviced by a road, so the proposal would be to consolidate in one pickup point. I'm not at all sure that Hardy Island wouldn't just be considered part of Nelson. It's there's all sorts of little islands. It's kind of like Thornby. Thornby's got North and South Island. We don't, because they got the same name, we don't consider them two separate. So Trail Islands, same. Mary Island.
I am going to make the suggestion that we look at the staff recommendation first, and then that Director Lee might want to ask for a budget proposal to be brought forward on the implications of adding Hardy Island to the service during the budget process. I see Director Seegers has her hand up.
Thank you. So the comment about, the fridge dying a week after and having to hang on to it for 2 years. Well, how do they get the new fridge there? Typically, what I'm noticing a lot of times with businesses that bring an item is they actually have an option to take away the one that it's replacing. So is that not something that, if the island people are getting this stuff there, there's got to be a way that could be, if they were aware that, they're going to hang on to it for 2 years, that could be part of what they actually put in place when they're looking at replacing these big items. Not sure if that's an option, but I know other areas they do that.
Thank you. Director Pratt.
Thank you. I would not be in support of option 3 without a very good and clear communication and consultation process with the islands. Right now, the annual service is very well received, and it's very well coordinated between the regional district and the individual islands. It is something that they look for. They don't, there is a feeling amongst islanders that they don't receive a lot of services from the SCRD, and they feel that they pay a lot. So I just putting this into context from what I know from speaking with my islands people. So I would not be in support of option 3. I'm happy with the staff recommendations at this time. I do think that we could look potentially through a consultation process about reducing or breaking it up a bit in recognition of climate change as well as other waste reduction options. But at this time, I'm supporting staff recommendations.
Thank you. I suspect if the Islanders were here, they would suggest that if we wanted to move the dial on garbage, we could put all the rest of the SCRD on annual garbage collection. And wouldn't that be fun? Alrighty. I don't see a motion on the floor, folks. We actually need a motion here so we can move this agenda along. All right, Director Pratt.
I will move the staff recommendations on page 132, please.
Do you have a seconder? I see a seconder. Awesome. Do we have any further discussion on this subject? I am not seeing any further hands, so I'm calling the question. All in favor of this motion? Any opposed? One opposed. Would you like that recorded, Director Ties? Sure? Okay. Thank you. Director Seegers.
Yes, out of the conversation that we've been having here, it seems like a further recommendation may be supported. It sounds like we would like to have staff engage in a community consultation on islands with regards to frequency and what the impact would be of moving to bi-yearly, like every other year, for collection.
Okay, that is a motion. I take it. Do we see any seconders for that motion, Director Ties? All right. Do we have further discussion on this topic? I myself am reluctant to launch us on another public consultation process because we have a lot circling right now. Director Toth.
I guess the only question I've got is, do we want to also engage with island residents who may not already be part of the program to see if we need to expand the program?
Alrighty. Does the is that a proposed amendment to the motion on the floor?
I wanted to see if other directors had thoughts on that before I take us down the road of amending it.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Lee, you're muted.
Well, I could hear it. I think that's an excellent suggestion, and I think we need to understand the cost per ton of each one of the stops. It's the chart that's on there is incomplete, even though it's excellent what is there. And I got to echo Director Pratt. They do pay their taxes for all of this garbage stuff we're doing, and yet they don't get the services. And that is part of living on an island, and we hear it from our island people for all sorts of things, not just the solid waste issue here. So I think the intent of the island cleanup program is to give a little bit back of what they put in for the greater good. And I think because the program's relatively new, and some of our remoter islands, such as Hardy Island and Nelson Island, had not been contacted previously. When I took over as the director, I started using my existing contacts, and I could find very few people on the island that actually even knew about this. And then once they did, you're seeing what we are now. And I'm still having to communicate to all of them. So I think, to be fair about it, we need to do this and make sure we've got it right. Islands are a little bit strange creatures, as everybody knows, and we have to be a little patient with them. They're quite patient with us. So I would support. I'd like to make a motion as to what Director Toth just said. If he could repeat it again, though, it would be cool.
Oh, okay. That would be amending the motion on the floor. Before we go there, I see staff. Mr. Rosenboom.
Thank you. Just for clarification purposes, and then as follow-up to the remark by Director Seegers. Yes, there's a lot of public engagement already happening. It's going to happen next year. And given the timelines, I suggest that we try to find some time in 2021 that we can do this, and that we'll bring back a report, let's say in a year from now, so that any changes can be implemented for the 2022 year and not for the 2021 year.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I think what I'm hearing is this is a fairly new service to the islands. Yes, they're starting to depend on it. And to Director Ty's comment in that we are actually creating behaviors. So it's, to Director Toth's comment, Director Lee, we're looking at how do we provide this service going forward? When this came up in the spring, it was because of cost of solid waste. So we are automatically saying, yes, we're going to add this. We're going to continue to do this. We need to look at, what is the behavior? What is the required service? Not saying, yes, we are looking to do this to go to every other year, biannually. But what is the required service that we're all agreed on, and not just piecemeal putting something in place? So it's basically looking at what I said. and next fall is perfect. I mean, that totally works.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, your motion had no timeline associated with it. So I'm just going to check in with our recording secretary to see if the motion that we think is on the floor is on the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I have that staff engage in a community consultation process with island residents on the impact of changes to service schedule.
That's pretty broad. I think that might cover us off. I see Jam Rosenboom.
Currently, the recommendation is only with respect to service schedule, not to service scope. Is that what is required, or should it also include tap materials collected, etc., etc., and the number of islands? Because the schedule is really on what and not on where. So another way of framing it is on the scope of the service delivered, or a review of the service scope of the islands cleanup program.
And does that address Director Toth's and Director Lee's points?
I am going to recognize Director Toth at this point.
Thank you, Chair. I'll propose an amendment that we also add on the number of islands serviced and the scope of materials accepted in the program.
Excellent. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? I see a seconder. That's good. Can I call the question on the amendment? All right. All in favor of the amendment to the motion? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes. Now we're back to the main motion. I'm not seeing any further hands. It looks like we have a motion that we like. This is good. All right. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Any opposed? Not seeing any opposed, that passes. Thank you very much. We'll bunt it back to staff to stick a timeline on that and then maybe come back to us at a future date. Now, our next item on the agenda, I'm just checking both my agendas this time to make sure, but it's the Minty Road garbage bin. Over to staff.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. The SCRD currently has one garbage bin located on Minty Road in Half Moon Bay that has been serviced weekly as part of the SCRD's curbside garbage collection service since 2009. The garbage bin service is the only one of its kind provided by the SCRD. The purpose of this report is to provide the board with an update on service issues associated with this garbage bin. And the report is being brought forward because there was a board resolution to install the bin. So any changes require board authorization. And thank you, and staff welcome the opportunity to answer any questions the committee may have.
Unsurprisingly, I see a hand from Director Pratt.
Thank you. I will say I did speak with the president of the Half Moon Bay Community Association just to get their, just as the director for the area, and he said that he was really surprised when staff reached out to him to say that the community association had actually purchased it, because he had no idea about it either. So there have been numerous complaints to myself, to, I know, the business owners in that area, and we in speaking with the community association president, I'm just really happy to move the recommendations on page 137.
Do I see a seconder? I see a seconder. Awesome. I see Director Seegers.
Thank you. This is just to staff on page 139. There is a link at the top, which I was looking to read, for garbage drop-off service options for non-permanent residents and tourists. And when I clicked on the link, I could not access anything. So, I wanted to look at what the other options were available or had come to the board. I remember the report coming, but I don't remember all the details. So I'm wondering if that could be provided to us at some point. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
This is one instance where the board has reduced a service level based on a service which was, we've talked about this, Dr. McMahon, that is there ever a time when the SCRD reduces its service? I think this is one time where a service was there, it's no longer needed, and we're backing out of the program. So yeah, looks like it's ran its course.
Thank you. Director Lee.
In fact, we did, in Pender Harbor, we used to have 2 bins here, SCRD funded, and the one bin was not manned full-time, the Hospital Bay bin, and it becomes such a mess with tourists and residents using it that we actually had to take it out a couple of years ago. So I fully understand what's happening here in Half Moon Bay. If you can't man it, and even when it's manned, they abuse it at night once you leave. But when you don't have it manned during the day, it just becomes a garbage pile. So there's no other solution we could find. We tried for years trying to figure it out, including locking it, but just didn't work.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think this is a case of the service no longer being needed. I think this is just more a case of it having become unmanageable with no ownership of the issue. I just wanted to mention, perhaps there's an opportunity for the general store to pick up on this, and maybe they charge a couple bucks a bag to visitors to allow them to drop a bag of garbage in their commercial dumpster. We've talked about possible options for visitors to be able to drop things off at their point of entry or their point of exit. They're right by the wharf. Might be a really good opportunity for them to just do a value add service.
Thank you. I see no further hands, so I'm going to call the question on this motion. All in favor of the motion? Thank you. Any opposed? No. Yay. And I'm really happy we don't have to go through our garbage service 1 bin at a time normally. All right, next item up is, this is a report from staff on resolutions to UBCM related to solid waste. Over to staff.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with the requested list of all solid waste related resolutions that the SCRD has brought forward to ABICC, FCM, and UBCM in the past 10 years. There has been some forward motion in regards to funding for cleanup of marine debris, derelict and abandoned vessels, and the provincial government is currently undertaking an engagement process regarding expanding extended producer responsibility programs. The other items have had limited to no on-the-ground forward motion. And thank you, and staff are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Illegal dumping in particular is still a problem that regional districts are wrestling with, unsuccessfully, I might say. Do we have any actions or further discussion of this item? Seeing no hands at present, I will thank staff for the report. We'll take it under advisement. And then the next item on our agenda is item 12, transit schedules for winter and spring 2021. Over to staff.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. In July 2020, the board confirmed the service level of the conventional transit system on the coast between September and late December of this year. Since data has become available on the actual ridership and revenue over the last several months. While due to the pending provincial elections, the confirmation of the exact financial support from senior level of government is unfortunately delayed. The purpose of this report is to seek direction from the board on the service level for the conventional transit service between early January and mid-May 2021. Thank you. Staff are welcome to answer, are here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. I see Director Seegers.
Thank you. On the graph on page 144, right at the top, it shows conventional transit ridership by month, and it ends at August. We've now had school back in for a month. I'm just wondering, has it had any impact on ridership?
Over to staff.
Thank you for the question. We don't get accurate ridership data for the current month. It's usually a delay for a month. But speaking with drivers and monitoring ridership levels ourselves, we have seen no spike in ridership with school at all.
Interesting. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. This is probably going to be my only opportunity to ask the question before the end of the year, so I thought I'd ask. Safe ride services are being canceled sort of all over the province, largely due to COVID, risk to volunteers, things like that. I'm wondering if staff have given any consideration to extending or further enhancing our transit services for the holiday season, New Year's Eve specifically.
Thank you. Over to staff.
Thank you for the opportunity. As transit service, in our collaboration with BC Transit, we have the opportunity to put some additional buses on the road in special circumstances. So we'll definitely review your question in that light and see what we can do.
Yeah, it's a good question, but we also don't know how many New Year's Eve parties there are going to be given COVID and our desperate lack of covered outdoor spaces. Watching that conversation on Facebook too, I never thought of inventorying how many covered outdoor spaces we have, and the answer is very, very, very few. So, do I see any motions? Director Hiltz put his real hand up first.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'd be happy to move the recommendations on page 143 as stated.
Seconders? Okay, I see that being seconded. I see no further hands. I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. That passes. Awesome. Next, we are up for the Q3 report for infrastructure, one of my favorites. Over to staff.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm glad to hear that you're looking forward to receiving this report. Because this report provides an overview of activities of the Infrastructure Services Department in the third quarter of 2020. I will highlight some, but I'm more than happy to take any questions on any of the items included in the report. First one I would like to highlight is that we're planning to do some water main replacement work in the South Spender area, Markway, Chrisway, this year. Later this year, we're awaiting some permits from Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure, and this work will be completed by our own crew. Another project I would like to highlight is our progress on our groundwater investigation in Part 2 Round 2. So the drilling of the well is completed at the Marianne West Park location, as indicated in the report, 440 feet. Pump test is being undertaken, I think even as we speak, or just finished it early this morning. So any information on yield I'm not able to provide yet. We signed an agreement with BC Ferry to drill a well on their property, and progress is also made on gaining access to the other, or securing access to the other two sites. Another project, or page 151 and 152, the graphs in terms of the flows at the Chapman and South Bender treatment plants both indicate that the flows this year, the maximum flows were lower than they were in previous years, primarily due to, as a result of the weather, as well as the water conservation stages that were in place this year. 153, the graphs with respect to transit revenue and transit ridership. It's obvious that there's no direct correlation between revenue and ridership this year, and it's in part the result of when our cash is actually recorded, and that has to do with pickup schedules and couriers and all that kind of stuff. So there's some inconsistency there. So revenue for 1 month can be only registered next month. That's why it's more interesting to look at the long-term trends than in monthly values. And our month passes are being sold less, and lots of more people are buying day passes, the new day pass since July 1st, or actual just cash fare. So hence our cash fare is going up and our monthly fares are going down. And there was a question during agenda review why the data on solid waste are only until August. That's actually the case almost every quarter, because we're just not able to get the data, including from Recycle BC to for September. We only get them in several weeks from now. So we're always a month behind here. Thank you. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
I'm going to jump in with one. I mentioned some of the highlights from this report at the Elphinstone Community Association meeting last night. The neighbors have been walking past the drill site in Marianne West Park practically every day and studying the cores that were laid out in the ground with great attention. But the question was, is this related to the water main replacement along Chester Road, and will the new water main be sufficient to take the volume from the proposed new well?
Good question. A, it's not related, and B, the volume will be all our mains are sized that they can easily take the volume that could be produced by any of the wells. Any of the more recent alpha main distribution. So I don't see an issue there in with this particular site. It might not be the case, for example, if we were successful with finding good productivity at Clear Creek. We know that the main from along the east side of the inlet is undersized to actually work as a supply main from a big source as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Director Tives.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. I'll start with the first one. I did not see any report on the environmental flow needs. Wondering if the weather was ever, or the flows were ever appropriate to do the studies this summer.
Thank you for that question. It's my mission that it's not included. Monitoring work was completed this summer. There was we started in early June, and it continued until very recently. And there were times where we actually managed the flows for the purpose of improving the monitoring, to getting the flows right so that our contractor could do the proper measurements. So next step is preparing, doing data analysis and preparing a submission for FINRO for an amendment to the event. That we're in early stage there.
Good. Thank you. Director Seegers.
I just want to say thank you for all of the information on water main and all the water projects. This is a place and it's information that, I mean, we're still hearing, even all the stuff we're doing, we're still hearing from the community. Nothing's happening on water. So this is a great report to show that, yes, there are a multiple number of projects moving forward in all areas. Not all of them are to do with water, but water related as well. When you talk about the water mains and the UV and all the different kinds of things. So I'm going to forward this out to some of the people who I've still have contacted me saying, you're not doing anything. Here it is. So good report.
Thank you. Director Tives.
Thank you. That takes me to my second question. Page 149, Chapman Creek Water Treatment Plant Residual Disposal and Planning. Apparently all offers were over budget. Other alternatives are being looked at. I'm curious as to what other alternatives other than raising the budget there may be. I don't know if you can comment on that at this point.
Exactly.
I'm not able to comment to really provide a lot of information in this setting at this moment.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to tag on to that question, actually. Sorry, Remco. The residuals needing to be disposed of, is that anything that can be coordinated or looked at in conjunction with the District of Seashell Engineering Department, given that we've got biosolids and residuals and things that we're going to need to start disposing of?
Great question.
That's indeed one of the options. That we could explore. The type of material and the potential use is different, but it's both materials that are not easily being disposed or being able to dispose of. So yes.
Excellent. Thank you. And I have one further question is, when we're doing water main replacements, what kind of communication do we do with residents to let them know that their street is going to be dug up for a few weeks?
Usually what we do is, besides social media, website, etc., it's door to door. We provide residents notice that, especially if they're water main, because often it could impact their ability to get to their house, to the residents, and it might sometimes require also a shut off of their water for some period of time. So we'll always try to notify them. In emergency situations, sometimes we cannot give them the heads up that but otherwise there was always a couple of days that we provide them with the heads up.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Director Lee.
Yes, this is an excellent report. It's well appreciated too, and it's going to help with communicating with our residents through our articles about all the stuff we're doing and provide more details. So the summary was great. Obviously done by a person that knew what they were talking about as opposed to me. But I have one other question. I'd like to kind of understand order of magnitude. And on the organics pickup versus the solid waste pickup, I guess the issue is that if you're going to every second week for each one of these, you would hope that the volumes eventually would be the same on both of them. And that way you could at least use an argument that you don't need both. Are we tracking that comparison to see? I'm curious for Pender as well, because if we can get more and more people doing this kind of thing, that would really help our landfill.
I see our manager, solid waste services, joining in again. So, Robin, would you be able to answer this question?
Thanks for the question. I may need to ask a clarifying question. So if I'm understanding it correctly, yes, staff are and will track the tonnage from the food waste from the processor. And we have and will continue to track the garbage tonnage that's collected curbside, as shown on page 156. Garbage that is received at the Pender Harbour transfer station is tracked. It comes in bins, like a resident self-haul as well as commercial traffic. They're put into bins, and then those bins are transferred to the Seashell landfill. So we track that, and then we also track all the different materials received at both sites.
Yes, I was thinking that it's a unique opportunity to compare in a controlled environment when you have the organics in one hand and the solid waste on another, and you've got those residents as a captive audience. You can get a pretty good idea of the effectiveness of the program. So, thank you.
Ms. Cooper?
Thank you. Just as a follow-up, so staff will incorporate the tonnage for food waste once we have it moving forward into these quarterly reports, as well as staff prepare an annual diversion report that looks at a much larger scope of materials that are either buried or diverted, and that usually comes forward in May of each year.
Thank you very much.
Just a follow-up, if I may, Chair. I think that that would be cool because in past years, Pender Harbour, even though they didn't have a program, were leading in the diversion percentage. So I'm kind of curious if this changes that voluntarily versus mandated. So it's an interesting thing to understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thank you, Chair. Now I'll echo great report. Thank you very much. Page 148, it's the Church Road well field. And just the kind of clarification that the well field includes the distribution aspect of the well field. So the construction, in terms of, there's a lot of things that will be happening in Grantham's, power lines, roads, but the kickoff will have it'll start somewhere and it'll end somewhere. And so I have this impression that you start at the bottom and you work all the way to the end, but is it going to be in kind of phased chunks along the way? Like when will residents get to have an idea of when their particular road is going to be in the construction zone? I guess that's so Wellfield includes all the distribution and then the details to residents about the timeline of those various bits of the whole project.
Good question. The actual construction schedule will be determined based on or in collaboration with the to be retained contractor, and depends on if they have one crew that's doing water main, several crews at the same time, and things that we will look at in terms of where to start are, of course, is the impact to the local residents, how to minimize it as much as possible, and also to avoid, for example, early spring next year, we would like to get not be working in between Bain and North, because then the summer season starts. So we would like to get rid of that. We want to be out of there. So those kind of things will be factored in. So more information to come. And what we'll do is we'll schedule public meetings, a public hearing, meeting, open house, once that's confirmed with the residents in the area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Near the bottom of page 150, Cemetery Road fencing and road access. It's mentioned that Modi repaired the road access portion. The fencing and final road work is to be completed by staff and SCRD staff. I can't remember the specifics of this project, but how did we get stuck with the road work on this one?
There's a portion of road on our land.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions, and I'm hoping we can move along. It's now 12:14 p.m. The next thing on our agenda is the PMAC minutes, which we have already received. Is there anything arising from the PMAC minutes? Not seeing anything. I believe that we can move on to the WASAC minutes. Do we have items arising from WASAC? Director Hiltz.
Thank you. We've been talking about recommendation number 1. And there was some wording that went out previously, I believe, that people had received. And now I got to find that wording. But there has been some suggested some language. So you have to bear with me while I find that little piece. Sorry about that. Still looking. Right. So the recommendation that's been suggested, and I'll read it out if that's suitable. Okay. That at the next WASAC meeting, staff provide an update on the current efforts to increase the SERD's public participation resources for engagement on the water supply and conservation. And that at the next WASAC meeting, staff present a draft high-level public participation plan on water supply and conservation for 2020 for discussion, and outline the potential role for WASAC in its implementation. And further, that staff bring forward the 2020 public participation plan on water supply and conservation to a committee meeting in late Q4 2020 or early 2021. So generally, and Director Teisel was also at the meeting. So it's how to help guide WASAC in terms of public input, I think, is the short answer, or short reason for this motion. I'll leave it at that.
I'm just going to note that in your second part, that should be the draft high-level public participation plan on water supply and conservation for 2021. It being a bit late to do it for 2020. So first off, can I second it? Well, all right. We have 2 seconders, so that's plenty. Next up is Director Theis.
Yeah, I just want to provide. Whoa, there's some echoes going on here. Everybody can hear me okay, I hope? Okay, I just want to provide some context regarding sort of the conversation that was had at WASAC. Ultimately, they were asking, what's our purpose? They're saying, well, there's 7 of us here with different levels of expertise, but what we really want, some of the members expressed that they really want to go out to the public and get public opinion and sort of be able to report that back to the committee, and so looking at what staff's recommendations are, I think the idea is to have WASAC stay within the expertise of the committee, not saying that they shouldn't be listening to the public at all, but at least they shouldn't be the ones doing the engagement and the soliciting, and that instead that staff and the board get their feedback on how we are engaging the public and how we should proceed in the future. So rather than doing public consultation on their own, it's more of a can we get some feedback from WASAC as to how we're doing it, and maybe some input on how it could be improved. Am I reading that correctly, staff?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Director. That's I think indeed the intent of the motion that's currently on the table. It's that the board and staff are doing the engagement and are accountable for that, each in their own way, we to you and you in a way to the public, you're the elected official, and they are advising us based on the expertise and their contacts, of course, within the community, because it's clear that they have contacts within the community and those are valuable. But the point that you're making between seeking input and receiving input, that's a point I also clarified at the WASAC meeting as well, in terms of what their role and responsibility is under their terms of reference currently.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. Could I hear the motion again before I pose my question?
I just sent it around to everybody.
Oh, did you? Via email?
Yeah, by email. And the only thing you have to do is read 2021 where 2020 is listed. But if you can't find it, Trace, you can also read it out.
No, I've got it here.
I'm just, while she's reading, I'm going to note that we are due for a conversation on committees and their various roles and how those interact with the roles of the organization. Because I think often the committees are out on their own and they don't really see how they fit into the full picture or how they fit into, we have a spectrum of public engagement from consultation to engagement thingamy. We have a document. And I don't think our committees are familiar with that or where they fit into that spectrum either. Over to Director Seegers.
Thank you. I think this addresses what my concern was with regard to the WASAC committee. My understanding, and I think the terms of reference laid out, is there to look at potential alternative solutions, which they would then bring to us, and we would evaluate and, take out to the community for input. It's not up to them to do that community input piece. We're looking for them for their expertise and their work on helping identify other options that we may not be considering. So I'm totally in favor of what this recommendation says.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. The next WASAC meeting is November the 2nd. Is that timeline appropriate for staff to be able to properly report back to WASAC?
We'll have to, because I think this is an important piece for WASAC. They really would like to see clarity here, and we'll do our best to provide something to them. And it depends on if there will be one-time discussion or discussion over 2 meetings, when we will be able to report back to the board. But at least I would like to have the discussion started on November 2nd, and maybe it takes 2 meetings, but then it takes 2 meetings to go over the discussion.
This is a fast-moving committee. As infrastructure chair, I'm going to endeavor to attend the next WASAC meeting so that I can hear what's going on too. Director Seegers.
Yes, I was just wondering, I haven't been paying that much attention to it. This is a public meeting? Is the information on how to attend posted somewhere on our website or something? So that if we wanted to attend, we could?
Yeah, and it's also, I think it's listed at least in the board calendar, but I'll make sure that you will have the information to it if you would like to attend.
a reminder would be helpful. Thank you. Director Seegers, do you have anything more? Your hand was still up. Director Lee.
Did we have a motion there that we needed to vote on? Oh, okay, I'll wait till that's done then. I'm in favor of it, so whatever we need to do, make that go.
All right. Seeing no further discussion of the motion on the floor, I'm calling the question. All in favor of the motion on the floor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes. Thank you very much. Director Lee.
Recommendation number 2 is that they were looking for some information on the background and update on aquifers and groundwater sources. Do we need a motion for them to get that, or would it just automatically be scheduled for them?
Thank you for the question. It would be appreciated if it would be pulled and voted on by the committee so that we can action it. We, especially given that there's the part about inviting consultants, and we do have budget to make that happen, but in order to allocate the budget, it would be appreciated if that's supported by a recommendation by the board.
So, do I hear a motion from Director Lee? You're mute.
Went the other way around now. That we accept recommendation number 2 on page 163.
Seconder? Yes, I see that seconded. Further discussion on the motion that is on the floor? Seeing none, I'm calling the question. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes. Thank you. Further discussion, Director Pratt.
Thank you. I'm going to just caution the other directors that we do have 2 directors that are already appointed to the WASAC committee, as well as other elected from the other municipal governments. So we want to be careful about how many elected we have on an advisory committee that are attending, because we don't want to subvert the conversation too much. There's a purpose for us having set it up that way. And so I just want to caution against having too many elected at a table of volunteers.
Okay, not too many cooks in the kitchen. Director Seegers.
Thank you. If it's set up as other meetings are, we can attend, and we would not be as part of the meeting. We would be there as attendees. So I think, in my view, I want to see what happens at this meeting, see how they interact. I have no intention of putting any, and would not be allowed to have any input, because I'm not one of the representatives.
Thank you. Director Tice.
Yeah, I just wanted to express that I also tend to take somewhat of a passive role at these meetings and just provide clarification whenever I can, but not really be somebody that is driving the conversation. So I think that would, at least that's my philosophy, and I think from what I've seen with Mark, that's sort of his approach as well.
Thank you very much. Director Lee.
Yes, I did actually attend the last WASAC with my face in the audience, which I didn't really want to do. I'd rather be at arm's length through a YouTube video, for instance, because I agree with we should not be influencing the committee. But I definitely was curious how it was doing and where it was going, because it's so new. So my hope was that we could get a kind of a YouTube feed that we could sit there and watch if we wanted, just a fly on the wall kind of thing. That's my hope. And I must commend both Director Tees and Director Hiltz. They took a very passive and didn't even answer questions when they were asked in some instances, which was cool.
I I will work with our, there are some technical changes we're working on in a way, Zoom formats, etc., with respect to our advisory committee. So we'll see what I can do in terms of if we can use this format as well, which would allow directors to be attendees and not panelists.
Thank you. Yeah, that question has come up a couple of times in regard to advisory committees because they are public meetings, especially APCs. And so the whole process for the public to attend hasn't been as clear as it could be. Director Pratt.
Thanks. I'm happy that staff is looking at that whole piece. It's, I mean, I'm intensely curious, especially around WASAC and PMAC, but because I'm not the director assigned to those committees, I don't go or attend, even though I would love to be a fly on the wall. So happy to hear any resolution from staff on that.
Okay, everyone wants to lurk. All right, Director Seegers.
I think if that is a concern that Director Pratt has, I think that for all of our meetings, that should be addressed because all of these meetings are public meetings. And so even as a member of the public, I have the right to attend, I know I have another role, but we need to make it so that all members of the public can attend and are welcome, and we manage their interaction accordingly.
Good. Thank you, everyone. We have one more item on our agenda plus new business. So the next item on the agenda is the letter from the Ministry of the Environment, which we have received regarding the expansion of recycling regulations. Did anybody have any further observations, comments, concerns, questions, anxieties? Director Toth.
I just wanted to highlight on page 166 the link to the actual engagement portal. Everybody, not just directors or staff, but anybody who listens to this or reads our agendas should take the time to go fill out that engagement survey because it's really important that the province hears the feedback from the community.
I just clicked on it and it says page not found. Perhaps staff could attempt to find the correct page and send us a link. That would be
actually the link has an extra piece attached to it. If you take off that at the end of the link when you go to it, the page is actually there. So just the link wasn't set up properly.
Just fine for me right now, so I don't know.
Okay. Thanks very much, everyone, and I'll make a note.
I know. I had the same error.
Okay. We are now on new business, and we have two items of new business. One was the Director Hiltz with the Resilience Summit.
Sure. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, people would have received through email that the Vancouver Island Coastal Community Resilience Summit for November 6th is being held virtually. And so I would like to propose a motion to have directors interested. It is also our budget day, so this is mostly going to be for alternate directors, and to also have the day rate applied to them. It's a whole day of them watching a Zoom screen. So this is an example of something in our COVID times that probably wouldn't have been possible last year. So if you may, the motion would be that I don't know if there's anyone else who Area E director, was there alternate gonna go as well? There was some
yes, my alternate is planning to attend. I just had a process question though, is should this motion not be going to board rather than committee?
Yeah, the question was also there. It will go to board through minutes. So the remuneration bylaw says board or CAS. So yeah,
I think we have several things circling out there, including the House Sound Forum. and perhaps we could take all of the remuneration questions to the upcoming board meeting and have a omnibus motion. Would that be appropriate, folks? Does the board chair want to weigh in on that? Okay, I'm gonna defer this to board if that's all right with you, Director Hiltz. Okay.
So I would direct that to who to get that to board? Who would I, CAO, or who would I send it on to?
Like corporate officer.
Send it off to Sherry.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. And then finally, my other item of new business, and I won't go into it at length, but I was inquiring of Director Lee, who is our representative to the AVICC Solid Waste Special Committee, whether that committee is getting much done, and would he be interested in reporting to us on that committee? Probably not right instantly, but at a future time. Director Lee? You're muted.
Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I of course I'd be interested in reporting. I believe our CAO and myself, we both attended the last meeting, and we could give you. I'm pretty sure we give an update at the time of the meeting, of course, but we could bring everybody current for at a future one of the meetings if you'd like. Probably this meeting.
I guess there's two aspects to this question. One is that when this committee was struck, there was some hope out there that there might be a solution found to some garbage problems for all of the participating communities. And then the other thing is that the meetings now are only annual. So it seems like the committee is not doing much at the moment. And has this been an effective committee? Is this the sort of initiative we should be doing more of in this region in order to move urgent shared problems forward?
To answer your question, they do have, there is a mandate or list of things they're working on, and a replacement for a landfill or waste to energy is actually not currently one of those items. I did bring that up at the last meeting, but there was no resolution as to whether we were going to expand the mandate or not to include that. I was personally surprised that it wasn't being addressed. Perhaps staff could fill that in. I know that the CAOs meet quite regular outside of the yearly meetings, so I'm sure GM Rosenblum would be able to add quite a bit here.
What I can add is that as part of our future landfill, future disposal options for solid waste project, for what to do if our landfill is closed, part of the scope of that project will be to explore opportunities for collaboration with partners in the region and elsewhere in BC on waste to energy, waste disposal options. So we incorporated it in our project outside of the AVICC role, but we of course will be using AVICC contacts as part of the process.
Good. Thank you. The next meeting of that committee, I think it last met in March of 2020. So perhaps we can have an offline discussion about how it's been running and whether there is an appetite for some changes. It came up at another AVICC meeting that I was at recently. Okay, I think that's, unless anybody else has a pressing issue, I think that's everything on my agenda. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. We did not name a alternate to that committee, and the other areas have named alternates to the committee. I think it would be quite appropriate if our current chair was named as the alternate to that committee. I wouldn't mind making that motion.
Infrastructure chair.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. Director Pratt's looking very alarmed.
No, not looking alarmed. When Director Lee said chair, our current chair, I had a moment of panic. I wanted to clarify which chair. I'm not. Are we sure we don't have a current alternate for this committee, Director Lee?
It wasn't listed in the minutes. I guess I'd have to check.
Okay. I'm happy to support that because I know Chair McMahon has a great degree of interest in this. And I haven't, she had posed the question to me earlier today and I haven't had a chance to check either. But we may already have an alternate chair, or an alternate rep, and it might already be Director McMahon, but I'm happy to support that, Director Lee.
If we make a motion, it will come back forward, so we can always revisit it.
I was just checking the chairs that I have on list, and no, we just sent my name to the chair, so there's only one named.
Is that a motion that I hear?
The same motion that we the chair of the Infrastructure Services Committee become the alternate to the AVIC Special Solid Waste Committee.
And I see that seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, that passes. Thank you very much. That finishes our agenda, except that I am really wondering if the person who threw out the entire turkey last week is the same person who threw out the entire bag of potatoes this week. But I guess we'll never know because we're not tracking it.
Somebody had a fight with their family, I guess.
We do have an in-camera agenda as well. Have to dig up the motion to go in camera. Right. I would like to see a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with section 91E, J, and K of the Community Charter.
So moved.
I see a motion. I see it seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Do we have any inquiries from the public before we go in camera? There's nobody in our gallery.
Yeah, there is no one in the gallery, Chair, and I don't have any questions from anywhere else. So,
awesome. Thank you so much. I think we can then move in camera. welcome back to the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting of October the 15th, and time to hear us adjourn. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Motion seconded. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.